Hey everyone, it's Alec Crawford, your host for the AI Risk Reward podcast. And our special guest today is Matt Metzger, clinical professor of economics at Belk College of Business at UNC Charlotte. So, welcome, Matt.
Thank you, Alec, and it's great to be here. Happy to be part of the show.
Yeah, well, some exciting news. Matt has just written a book called The Overnight AI Educator, where he talks about how educators can use AI with their students, and we'll get to that eventually, and think about a little more about our theme of using AI ethically in education. But I want to rewind time a little bit and say, hey, tell us about your first job. You've got your PhD, your first job teaching. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I finished at the University of Tennessee and then went on the job hunt and ended up at Kent State University in Ohio and went up there. It was a great experience. And from then, I've kind of just jumped around. I worked in the private sector for a bit. And then now I've been at UNC Charlotte for, I think in the fall will be the 15th year. So for quite a while there.
Wow, that's awesome. And so, what were some classes that you taught at Kent State when you showed up there? All of a sudden, it's like, oh, like it's surprise! You got to teach some classes. Like, what were you teaching?
Well, I taught undergrad economics, and the good news, I had already
Oh,
done that really in my PhD program. So they had kind of given me responsibility to teach like full sections. So I'd had some experience with that with the large sections, and then I taught some MBA classes as well. And so
oh,
that
cool.
was a new experience, but it was good trying to meet uh, a different group of students and different motivations. Also,
Oh,
I could say I met my wife there because that was true. She was in one of the MBA classes, so I guess that was really beneficial.
wow, exciting. Well, that's I love stories like that. And tell us about an influential boss or mentor you had and how it impacted you.
Yeah, I'd say when I worked in the private sector, it's just a different coming from academics as far as some of the expectations and the speed and everything like that. And so I think maybe I was not being as disciplined as is needed in the private sector. And so I had a supervisor kind of sit me down and say, hey, you may be doing things in your head that you think are okay, but you just, in a leadership position, you have to be aware of how everyone else is going to perceive that. And so if you say, you're not taking this meeting or this task seriously, then other people are going to pick up on that. And so, we don't want that. Obviously, you're trying to have a productive vibe and positive experience for everyone. So, really had a big impact on me. It was a relatively short conversation, but I remember it, 20 years later. So, very influential.
Yeah, no, that's excellent, excellent advice. And you mentioned a book before the show, Understanding by Design by Grant Wiggins. Pitch the audience on that.
That was a great book. He introduced, at least to me, the concept of what's called backwards design. And so that just means, when you're thinking about teaching and educating, you want to think about the end goal first. And it's a little counterintuitive and a little backwards about how a lot of, teachers operate, where you think, well, okay, here's how I need to do this lesson or this activity or whatnot. But you really need to focus on the end first and then build, a bridge or a sequence of activities to get students to that end point. So it's a easy mistake to make. And when I read that book, it really clicked for me and helped me tremendously in terms of designing classes and educating everyone.
Cool. And is it broader than that? Is it about like physical design of spaces and things like that, or?
He had some other books. I think he had Schooling by Design, if I remember, where he
Hmm,
talked more about that with the spaces and the environment and the
interesting.
administration. He had a book too called Essential Questions, where it looked at more just kind of overarching questions for a curriculum. But Understanding by Design was really more for teachers and day-to-day setup.
Got it. So tell us the origin story of writing this book, Overnight AI Educator, right?
Hmm.
How did that come to you?
Well, I was a little late to AI because, I had seen stuff and read some stuff. And I remember my dean was asking me, you want to go to this meeting about it and all that. And I was kind of had, I was a little lukewarm on it. And then last year in 2024, all of a sudden it really, it hit, my students and therefore my classes and everything else in a really rapid sequence. And so I think in spring of 2024, that's when students started to use, ChatGPT a good bit more. But by the fall, it was all over. In terms of students' use, I think it was 80% of students were using it by then, and it transformed everything. It made me transform everything because all these previous assignments you were giving, if they're multiple choice or closed questions, we'll find out this number, this calculation, were just totally gone. AI could do all of that. And its, power was increasing throughout the fall semester and even the spring semester. So it's gone beyond even what that was. So it really forced me to have to redesign everything. And, I put a tremendous amount of work in. And I guess I'm thinking now I'm just trying to help the next person who's doing that to, one, avoid some of my mistakes, but two, give some ideas that they can use to kind of shorten the process, to make it more streamlined, more efficient, and get, everyone else sort of up to speed, so to speak, in this.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the start of AI, there were two philosophies that came out pretty quickly. It was, we're going to ban AI, no one can use it, and there was the, yeah, you can use it, but like you got to show us what ChatGPT says, and you got to show us what you said. And I think the vast majority of schools are just like, hey, if you can't beat them, join them at this point. And I can't even think of a school that it's like, oh, we're not going to use AI at all in our program, at least at the college and graduate level. Maybe, I mean, in kindergarten, yeah, I get it, but but college and graduate level. And what's also interesting with the business schools is that I've heard that companies are coming to the schools saying, hey, when your students graduate, like we need them to be able to use AI, right? Like they're hoping that the people coming out of coming to school are going to be kind of the point generation for AI. Everybody's using it, but obviously at different degrees.
Absolutely. We had the board of advisors for our Belk College of Business come in. So these are all leaders in large companies in Charlotte. And, so we asked them, what about AI? And they said, absolutely. We're using it for all these business projects. We want students exposed to it. We want students to be able to use it in a productive way. And so, yes, they want, students right now to be exposed to it. And when they graduate, to be able to do something with it. Yeah.
Yeah. So what are some takeaways from your book or some things you want other educators to avoid that are in the book?
Well, I start with that. We were talking about backwards design. I really start with that as that first step is that, you have to look at what job skills are in demand, right now and what are going to be in demand over the next, 5 or 7 years, whatever you can predict. And so, step one is really, you can use ChatGPT or whatever AI tool for this, is do a deep dive on what the
Hmm.
current job ads are looking for.
Mm.
So ChatGPT has that deep research, and you can say, for economics graduate this year, comb through the job ads and pull me the top, 5, 7, 10 skills, whatever you want, that
Hmm.
employers are looking for. And so that's really the starting point because, you don't want to be teaching 20-year-old skills, for a current job
No,
market.
no, for sure, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
And
going to
so,
show you how to use Lotus Notes.
well, and I'll tell you, you mentioned, some schools, you would think all schools are using it. I was on a podcast with a professor in Spain the other day, and he said, unfortunately, a lot of his school, they're regulated within Europe as to what they can and cannot do with AI. And so they're having to do
Mm,
some of these multiple choice tests just due to in Europe, the degrees have to be kind of transferable from one country to another. And so you have to kind of say you're getting the same thing at whatever school you go to. So they're
wow.
a little handcuffed compared to the US.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, the EU AI Act is pretty comprehensive and really focuses on consumer protection and classifications of AI in different risk categories. There are a lot more rules over there than over here for sure. So how should we think about AI and ethics in education? Like this is going to be super important going forward.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel, there's a couple of big areas because one, a lot of professors were worried initially about the just the cheating aspect that, okay, I'm going to give, students this assignment and they're just going to use AI to complete it. And it could even be
Hmm.
an open-ended if it's a discussion.
Hmm.
Here's a discussion prompt and now talk about it. You can obviously have ChatGPT produce that. So the initial kind of wave about ethical concerns was really them using it in an improper way to complete what I'll call older, or you could think of almost as outdated assignments.
Hmm.
And so once you figure out, what skills are in demand, the next step is to build kind of current assignments that integrate AI into them. And so you want to have
Mm.
assignments where you're encouraging students to use AI. And so let's say it's a marketing proposal where the students have to submit this marketing proposal for a client or company or whatever. Tell them that you can use AI to help you, create a new logo, create some ad copy, right? Create a mock design of a web page, whatever, the assignment requirements are. But you want them to use that tool in a real way to perform realistic job tasks. And that's one thing I think people think, AI, it can eliminate some jobs, but the majority of jobs are still there, but they're just being done differently. And so if you go to, a job site and put in pricing analyst, that job still exists. Just because AI can calculate a price doesn't mean you don't need a pricing analyst. You need someone who can use AI to get better forecasts for how should we price this and, what does this pricing data mean and so on and so forth. And so those are the sort of tasks we want to train students in, realistic tasks. So when they graduate, they can do this, enhanced type of work using AI properly as a tool.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I mean, look, there are two scenarios, neither of which are going to happen over the next 2 years. One is everybody gets their AI tools. It takes the drudgery out of your job. Efficiency and productivity in the economy increase. Like the rising tide floats all boats. Like everything's awesome. The flip side of that is, companies replace white collar jobs with AI, and we end up with 15% unemployment or worse, and kind of riots in the streets, and Congress trying to figure out like, what do we do, right? Neither one of those is going to happen. And my point to politicians and leadership and regulators and people such as yourself is, well, which one of those scenarios do you want? Because if you really want the first one, we kind of have to work towards that, right? It's not just going to magically happen by itself. And along those lines, ethically, we should probably be concerned about access to AI. I sit on the executive board of the Global AI Ethics Institute, and I think we are going to see, for example, very big differences among countries based on their access to AI, right? So if you think about what's going on in the world right now, the US has very good access to AI, China, pretty good access, Europe, maybe not quite as good as the US. You just mentioned that regulation is actually stymieing some use of AI in education. Well, then you go to South America, like they're just not going to get the same level of access to AI, or it doesn't seem that way right now. And that's going to really allow countries, for better or worse, to separate in terms of their potential economic outcomes. Hey, you're an economist. Let's talk about this.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, it's very true when you see historically some of these technological innovations that don't spread evenly for sure. And so, in economics, we talk about like the solo growth model is one way to measure what you're talking about, where technology plays a role in amplifying productivity. And yeah, I mean, I would hope countries, kind of update their views on AI, that they're looking at it again as a positive tool rather than trying to limit it in some way. And of course, again, other ways, just if they don't have enough funding or, infrastructure for it to get people access is obviously another problem as well.
Yeah. So what are you most concerned about now in terms of using AI ethically in education? Not necessarily use your students, but just kind of more broadly across education.
Well, I'd say a few things. I mean, one, I am hesitant about it drifting into younger and younger age groups because,
Hmm.
I don't think it's a great tool for a first grader or something like that. I mean, there has to be some limits where you have to have some foundational thinking skills before you're enhancing them with AI. If you don't have those foundational skills, to me, it seems problematic. I would say also with that, the one of the risks of AI that it can it will become so helpful as an assistant that it can kind of draw people in more and maybe a little more screen time than they want, and then a little more relationship with AI instead of humans, so to speak. Kind of seems like a risk as well. So those are maybe more like indirect, I would think. I mean, the central thing is obviously the data handling, and is if are the prompts you put in, is that any of that confidential? And I just read, I think last week, maybe you saw it, about New York Times. There was some lawsuit about they have to keep certain chat records with ChatGPT now when they didn't think they had to, and now is this confidential? Nobody really knows. So that's the number one aspect for sure, is it private? But beyond that, there's really interesting kind of sub issues, I'd call it, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think privacy is a really big issue. One of the things we focus on, especially with corporate clients, is having their own private AI, so they don't have to worry about ChatGPT keeping, the records of their chats, and then that's open to discovery or could create a legal problem for that company later. Literally for every AI you use, you've got to read. I mean, it's terrible, but you actually do have to read their policy, right? So a good example is Perplexity. I was at a banking conference, and there's someone up on stage and in front of hundreds of people saying, "Yeah, I just put my bank client data right in Perplexity and asked it questions." And someone in the
Mm.
audience gasped and raised their hand and said, "Did you realize that per the license agreement, Perplexity owns everything that you send it, and they own what they send you back?" And the guy like nearly passed out on stage. So there's just a lot of misinformation out there, and he was literally telling hundreds of people, "Oh yeah, just go use Perplexity with your client data," right? Like terrible idea, right?
Right.
So a lot of it is, and obviously not malicious. He just didn't know, right? Like so, it's going to be super important for people to deeply understand, like when I do something with AI, is this private or not? And AI is being used even, probably without even your consent. Like, you pop up your phone and it says, "Oh, the summary of this email is whatever." Like AI is creating the summary. Like to create the summary, that means AI ingested the entire email.
Yep.
Like, where did that happen? Is that private? Is it not private? Like, so I've got a lot of concerns about AI privacy. Beyond that, I think as AI agents become more common, some of the new protocols, so the model context protocol has huge security holes in it, right? So I think AI security is going to go from being an afterthought to central, right? And so we need to think about, AI security as well. So for now, don't put anything too secret in AI, but you know, that's for sure.
I
And
also I had a student, maybe you have some thoughts, but I had it was in another class, but someone was using AI, and the student said they didn't want to use AI due to environmental reasons. And
oh,
so
interesting.
that
Yeah.
hasn't happened to me yet, but I imagine it will at some point. So, something like that is kind of a different issue, maybe indirectly related to ethics as to if this person feels it's, inappropriate use of resources, should they be compelled to use it? I'm not really sure.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Well, I think that the statistics are that a couple years ago, in the U.S. at least, I don't know worldwide, AI and data centers consumed about 6% of electricity in the country.
Hmm.
And the projection, and this is maybe a little bit stale from Wells Fargo research, was by 2030 roughly 20% of US electricity consumption will be data centers and AI.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So tripling within, less than a decade. So, and look, even if they're wrong, even if it's like 18% or
Right.
16, it's still a giant growth, right? Which is why you see uh, big tech companies running around trying to buy electricity from, the old 3 Mile Islands, all kinds of new next gen nuclear reactors being spun up, all kinds of stuff like that. There is going to be a race, and if you look at the map of the race right now, it looks problematic, but I'm sure people will figure it out eventually.
Mm.
Um, so what do you so turning back to AI and philosophical questions, what are you most concerned about? So forget about AI and education for a minute, but what are you most concerned about in terms of AI over the next decade or two, besides giving the first graders chat GPT?
Well, I would think, one of the more obvious issues that's going to come up is that right now, those highest models of ChatGPT are near or at PhD level, depending on the subject they're in. And that then presents a number of problems. One for universities, because now, it used to be universities were the dispensers of knowledge, and now the cost to obtain knowledge is going to be, near zero, and it's going to be high level knowledge. And so you're going to have that situation where a college student could use AI to produce a better answer than they could themselves. They can, if
Hmm.
they're kind of a bachelor's level student,
Sure.
now they could use this and produce a PhD level answer, so to speak, even if they don't really fully understand it. And so I think when they talk about AGI and when will artificial general intelligence, when will it reach that? I think that's going to create a whole host of new issues as far as what does education now mean when you have agents that can do all these high level things, and then on the other end, is there still going to be demand for that, for the traditional education? And so I think if anything, it may change it to some other skills will be involved. It will become more important. Sort of the communication, the presenting, social skills, networking, all that sort of stuff may rise up more. That's kind of the return to knowledge is kind of shrinking, so to speak, is what's going to happen over time.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of different scenarios out there. It's going to be difficult to predict. So, what would your advice be for business school students right now? I think every business school student I ever meet is like, I want to be an entrepreneur, which is probably not a terrible idea, but that can't be the only job.
That's right. Well, yeah, I mean, you mentioned earlier, like, will there be mass unemployment and all that sort of thing? Historically, whatever innovation comes up, you don't typically see these high spikes in unemployment. And so it's unlikely that even if AI reaches, very high levels, that it's going to wipe out, jobs and have 20% unemployment. Historically, that, never seems to happen. It could, but it just doesn't seem likely. And so, current students are in this phase now, I think actually a fairly good phase, because they can come in, so to speak, as like an AI native, so to speak, that AI kind of came about while they were in college. If they did things right, they had time to, experiment and use the tools and so on and so forth, and could come into a business and maybe have an advantage, because if someone's been there 20, 30 years, they're working and now trying to learn about AI in addition to their normal job tasks, they might not have the time or energy to invest in that. Versus if you're learning it as a fresh college graduate, hopefully you've had a chance to really put some time into it. And that's why I encourage my students, like to go into, we're using Boodlebox to say, try these different models, see what models produce the best results for what tasks.
Hmm.
If you're trying to generate images, if you're trying to do research, build that as a skill that when you come to work for a company, you can say, I've tried these different models and I know, which models to use for which task, which lever to pull, so to speak. That can give them a leg up on someone who's working and trying to kind of look back and fill in this AI gap.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Well, that totally makes sense. Um, yeah, so our last section is the lightning round, where I mention something and you tell me if you think it's underrated or overrated. Um, so we're going to kick it off, since you live in Charlotte, with Charlotte's terrible traffic. Is it really terrible or not as bad as people think?
Yeah, it's gotten quite a bit worse. So I would say that's underrated, if anything. And I'd also say my judgment's affected by, when people come to visit and all that stuff. Now they're complaining about it. So uh,
Yeah.
from an outside view, that kind of, if you live here and the traffic gradually gets worse, you don't realize it. But if somebody comes once a year or something like that, it's clearer for them to see. So it's not, like
Yeah.
DC levels or anything, but it's definitely pretty bad.
Yeah, DC's pretty bad. Yeah, and at least they have a commuter train, whereas Charlotte, I think my understanding is the commuting options are limited.
We have that light rail, but it's not really through all parts of the city. It's connected to the university, which is
Yeah.
good, and goes from the
Oh, that's
university
good.
to uptown. But they're
Okay.
planning to expand it kind of like into an X eventually, so we can reach all parts of the city.
Cool. Soccer or club soccer or whatever you want to call it for the over 40 crowd. Underrated or overrated?
Underrated, yeah, yeah. I love getting out there. My son plays. He's younger. He plays actual club soccer, and kind of, I played when I was a kid, so it reinvigorated me to go out and play again. And yeah, it's been great. I'm sure we all take it too seriously for what it is. But
That's what always happens. I would just injure myself. Yeah, that's I'm not I'm I
right.
can tell you that right now. All right, and shifting gears to AI. AI in video production, underrated or overrated?
Underrated as well. And I think that's one of the big tools faculty can use right now. When you're talking about other countries' access, you can create what's called a digital twin, which a lot of your listeners may know, but that's where like HeyGen, HEYGEN, I know does that. So it can record a few minutes of video of you talking, and then you give it a script, and now it creates a video of you reading the script that you never really read. But for me, the even cooler part is I can also have you speak in different languages. And so I
Yeah,
can
cool.
say, here, have me say this video in Spanish or whatever, or Japanese, and
Wow.
roll that
Yeah.
video out to people in these other countries. So that can help education really expand into a lot of these different areas where it's now customized, it's being spoken that native language. And I think that's a tremendous tool. I think that'll
Yeah.
definitely be something to come.
Yeah, the question is, how many languages do we want to translate this podcast into, right?
That's right. Exactly. More the better.
Uh, all right. Next item is drawing to relax, underrated or overrated?
I would say in the middle, because I definitely I draw myself to relax, but some of the competitive nature in me then tries to get
Mm,
better at it, and so on and so forth. And so again, I've done some stuff here in Charlotte locally in the with the art scene, so I get pulled into being competitive just by my nature, but still probably slightly underrated.
all right. Mr. Rogers, Fred Rogers, underrated or overrated?
Oh, I'll tell you, I was at the Fred Rogers conference last summer, and saw some things like the original trolley and the Daniel
Oh,
Tiger
wow.
and all those things were kind of in the archives behind the glass, and it was tremendous fun. I met a lot of great educators. A lot of people really had a lot of great heart for what they were doing, and so highly underrated.
Yeah, I got to say that just proves that there's a conference for everything, Matt.
That's right. That's right. I submitted that, and my chair was like, "Really? There's this, Mr. Rogers conference?" I said, "Yeah,
Yes,
it's
there
real."
is. All right. And then how about the MacGyver TV show? Underrated or overrated?
Yeah, and I mean the original. I think they did a remake. I don't know, sometime after that, but the original show from the '80s is still on the reruns or whatever, where he has his Swiss Army knife and a pack of gum or whatever, can get out all these jams and everything like that. So it's still good TV in my view, though it's probably pretty dated.
Yeah, no, it's still probably, I'm not sure how well it held up, but maybe okay. Um, Reading blogs on Substack to learn about AI, underrated or overrated?
Yeah, I'd say it's underrated as well. You know, Substack's got so many blogs, so many different things. But in there, you're able to find some different things talking about AI in education, screen time, so on and so forth. So it's been. Uh, I wish it would have been there kind of earlier in the internet, because it's like
Hmm.
I felt there was like a dip in that sort of content because originally you had blogging and there was all these kind of great independent voices, and then everything got sucked up by Facebook and Twitter for a number of years, and then it independent publishing kind of came back a little bit with Substack, and so I love hearing about the independent voices and different perspectives that you don't really often see or get from traditional social media.
Yeah, I agree. I've got a Substack, so I'm gonna be forced to agree with you. How about uh, as a university professor teaching summer class, underrated or overrated?
Well, I'd say overrated only because the motivation of the students taking it dipped tremendously in the summer compared to regular
Mm,
semesters. And so, even like during a traditional semester, I might teach one section online. And then in the summer, I teach online, but it's a really totally different experience because I think most students are working full time in the summer, maybe
yeah.
40 hours a week. And it's just not the case like it is during a regular semester. So unfortunately, it ends up being more, or I'm more optimistic about it than how it often turns out. So
Yeah, exactly. The triumph of hope over experience.
that's
Um, and then finally, Ferris Bueller's Day Off, the classic movie, underrated or overrated?
Oh, underrated. Yeah, I love that movie, and it had a big impact on me as a kid. And when I was at the conference in Chicago, I was able to go to some of those locations. Like if you remember where the Ferrari was in the garage, kind of overlooking the little ravine. So we went there and got some pictures. No, there was no one home at the house, so we just went right in the backyard up to that building. It's still there, and it was all sort of and interesting things like too. I didn't know the house used in the movie Risky Business with Tom Cruise is actually in that same neighborhood. And so
Wow.
there's a whole bunch of kind of movie connections there. But yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on the show, Matt. Do you want to tell people where they can find your book, The Overnight AI Educator?
Sure, yeah, it's on Amazon. It's been released, and the book website is overnight.education. And so we have some resources there and a list about upcoming events, and people can contact me there. Always happy to work with people or talk more about the book. But I really am excited. I think it's a good process that's laid out. A lot of educators are maybe hesitant about upgrading AI. They think it's going to be a ton of work and they're maybe afraid to do it. But, if you just get comfortable with the tools, you can make a transition very quick and it'll be better for you as a teacher and it'll be better for your students because you can equip them for the jobs that are out there today.
Awesome. Matt, thanks for coming on the show. This has been Matt Metzger, clinical professor of economics at Belk College of Business at UNC Charlotte and author of The Overnight AI Educator. Thank you, Matt.
Alec, thank you. Yeah, it's been great. I really appreciate the opportunity here.